Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of MSP 1337. It is the last Tuesday of the month, and I'm gearing up to go to London for a MiaCon and to do workshops around the Trustmark. And so I thought, who better to have on the show than Jim Harryman of Kinetic Technology Group, because he is going through the CompTIA Cybersecurity Trustmark. Jim, welcome to the show.
Good to be back.
So this is your umpteenth time on the show. So I think you get the, what is it? The Saturday Night Live. You need the jacket, the five-timer award, right?
You just got to pick a color, Chris. That's all.
All right, I got to pick a color and get the jacket out there. So we have roughly 65 plus solution providers today actively going through it. I say actively because that might be a strong word for some of the solution providers that are currently in the program. But there are quite a few that are very active. Your organization being one of them, where, if I'm not mistaken, you're looking to be assessed before the end of the year, correct?
That's my goal. I haven't been through a few audits in the past. You know, we've got a routine down, and so it's just a matter of carving out the time to do it. And in the past, with the audits that we have been through, there's been a lot of the as you're going through it, you know, the requests coming in. And so that kind of helps keep you on task.
Sure.
With this program so far, I mean, it's really more, it is more self-paced as opposed to, you know, somebody, hey, send me this, you need to upload that. I'm sure that would come at some point, you know, when somebody gets there and starts actually assessing it. But you know, the things that I've dealt with in the past, it was mostly just kind of a series of questionnaires, which, you know, you go through kind of a gap assessment in the beginning of the Trustmark, which is really cool. It's kind of like a questionnaire of, here's all the things that we're going to require. Are you doing them or not? And then you kind of move on from there. But that's really been the only difference for me, is that it's been more self-paced, and I've had to be a little bit more disciplined about it because I don't have anybody riding my tail about it, so to speak.
So let's rewind a little bit, because you didn't just, you know, decide one day I should just do the Trustmark. You were already doing, for lack of a better word, like-minded things. So you didn't decide to do SOC 2. I believe that's one that you did prior to pursuing the Trustmark. You didn't just go and say, hey, I think we should be SOC 2 just because it. You know, talk me through the idea behind feeling the need, since you're not in a regulated industry. Your clients didn't say, Jim, please get a SOC 2 so we feel comfortable working with you. What led you to pursuing a framework or to get compliant against a framework of any kind?
So what happened was we started participating in a peer group organization, and within that, there was a lot of conversation. Every single call was all about cybersecurity. What are we doing? You know, so on and so forth. And, you know, our leaders within that organization were like, well, we're gonna get something kicked off here and want to do this. And in the process of that, I was like, okay, I need to find something that is kind of already established to, you know, I'm not very patient in certain things. And so I really felt the need to, well, ultimately it's this, Chris, we felt that the industry was either going to regulate at some point, and I still think that's a possibility, or at the very least, there would become more of a demand from our clients as we continue to grow and hopefully engage larger organizations along the way, that there would be requirements needed of us to get that business. And so with that, I just did some research, made a decision to go the SOC 2 route, engaged an organization that's in our industry that does that type of work. And so that's where we started. And through that process, the peer group security program continued to evolve, and we've stayed active within that and participate in the leadership of that as well. And so it's just kind of grown. At the end of the day, I feel like if we weren't prepared for whatever the inevitability is, whether it's regulation or client demands, that if we weren't prepared, that our organization was going to suffer. And I'm looking at it from a longevity perspective as an organization, and felt that this is what real businesses do.
Right.
So
to be resilient requires
right.
putting things in place that enable resiliency. And I think we in our industry especially, I think there's a lot of like, well, just tell me what I need to buy. Or we work with the following vendors. They've told us if we implement the products that they sell to us a certain way, then that's really all we need to do. And I think time and time again we see a pattern emerge that says either I failed to implement the way they told me to, or the implementation, as perfect as it might be, doesn't cover everything. In essence, there's still holes that require people to fill them. We see that in roads all the time. No matter how good of a job the pavers do, inevitably within 2 to 3 years, there's a sinkhole or a random right. It's broken for no apparent reason. Like, what happened here? Like, it shouldn't be like this. This is a brand new road. That's, I think, the way a lot of business would like to believe that they're operating, right? Like, no matter how well we've implemented a program or a tool or otherwise, it's only as good for as long as we maintain it. And so to your point, I think, if I understand correctly, going from the SOC 2 type model to the Trustmark was a natural progression to continue that, and quite honestly to do something that obviously doesn't cost nearly as much as what it would have to continue on the path you were on.
Yeah, I think the SOC 2 side of things, if we were required to go back that direction, it would be an easy switch back to us, because the Trustmark is different and might have some different requirements outside of what SOC 2 is. We've already established a routine within what we were already being audited for, and we're not going to stop doing those things. To us, quite honestly, the Trustmark actually satisfies more security things than what an actual SOC 2 does.
Sure.
And so the SOC 2s are always subjective, and that's the other reason I like the Trustmark above and beyond the SOC 2, is just because it really focuses in on a lot of the technical things in our industry that other things don't. And even though we were audited based on our entire organization, in other words, we weren't just like, okay, well, just audit us about this and not about this. In other words, we got audited not only for our internal, but actually the processes and procedures that we provide for our clients on the SOC 2 side. So it was everything. And so it covered a lot of stuff, but there was still a lot of gaps from that versus what the Trustmark offers in that regard.
And to sort of defend your point, maybe not not shining on the Trustmark for a second. The reality is the Trustmark is going to have gaps too, right? Like, the Trustmark is not meant to be an all-encompassing. I had it said, on a call earlier today, that think of the Trustmark as an eclipse of the sun. And so you got a black circle now on the sun, and you can look at that black circle, right? You can see that. And quite honestly, that black circle in theory is going to get bigger over time, but it's never going to eclipse completely the sun.
Absolutely. You look at it like this. Every event or incident that has occurred that's been reported and everything else have been companies that are following some sort of cybersecurity framework, right? The fact is
Allegedly.
they all have
Sure.
gaps,
Yeah.
right? All of them have gaps. It doesn't matter which framework you choose, which program, which audit, which platform, which whatever. They all have gaps that we're all basically playing from behind all the time to try and mitigate those things and fill those gaps up. So it's always going to be a challenge. But
So
I think
I've always been passionate about CIS. You've known this. You've known me long enough to know that it went predated CIS Top 18. But one thing that has always stuck with me is technology controls, not prescriptive, are often just not implemented. Because if it's vague enough, we can rationalize doing it, right? Like, oh no, we're already doing that, because if you read this the way I read it, we're definitely doing that. I don't think the CIS safeguards, which is a large part of the trust mark, give you that opportunity to interpret that vague. Like, it just said, when it says you need to use MFA for all external applications, it's really saying, like, as in the word all means all external applications. And I think
right.
that's hard sometimes, because we go, well, all of my applications are external. It's like, okay, then you probably need to have MFA on all of your applications.
Yeah, and if you haven't done an analysis of that within your organization, it's like that's a daunting task. And
Absolutely.
I know there's probably people that have started the trust mark that maybe haven't done some of those things yet. And so that's something that we did. We had never done it before 4 years ago, right? But it's something that now we have and we keep up to date internally. And a lot of it is manual, like bookkeeping. It's very administrative in a lot of ways, and you just have to stay on top of it. And
You
it
don't
is
use AI to balance your books?
not yet.
That raises a really, I think it's a good question. As you were going through this process, and we know one of the controls within the trust mark is based on CIS, and it's what applications are part of your authorized inventory. And you brought up a really good question. So starting on this 4 years ago, CIS driver, how many applications do you think you had then versus how many do you have now? Has it continued to grow? Have you consolidated a lot of applications? Were there applications you just didn't know were out there, and you're like, hey guys, why do we have 6 versions of Adobe Acrobat and Qt FTP and Foxit and fill in the blank?
Sure. I mean, initially it was a full list of applications, not just services or service providers or tools that we were using that were cloud-based or
Sure.
SaaS-based. So it was a pretty long list. We did narrow it down we have a application list and then we have a service provider list. So it's two
Sure.
different things for us now. It was originally one big long list, and now it's two. We have approved apps that we use on our devices, and then we have services that we use as the organization. And so
I think that makes a lot of sense,
yeah,
because then you're also highlighting where your responsibility or burden of risk and responsibility comes into play. So the reason why I brought that up wasn't because I wanted you to just tell us how many applications you're managing. It was more of like, as you're going through this process, whether you're pursuing the trust mark or not, the goal shouldn't be like, today I'm going through control 2 and I have to get to 100% of control 2 in order to move on. I mean, we're seeing this pattern emerge quite a bit with a lot of solution providers where they get stuck and are not making progress. And I'll just say, Trustmark included, you're not going to make progress if you don't just take a step in the forward direction. You said this on a call, I think it was Monday of this week. You may be taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back, and that is still forward progress in the context of what we're trying to accomplish.
absolutely.
So as you're going through the trust mark, obviously I wanted this to be trust mark feedback. what was the biggest challenge? What was the most daunting thing? Forget the platform, obviously that's evolving and maturing, but
Sure.
like what was the biggest sort of like, oh, haven't had to deal with this before?
Let's see. I would say that um, it it's all going to probably go back to the CIS side because most of the governance pieces that are included in the trust mark are things that we're really focused on within our SOC audits. And
They're in a
so,
lot of other frameworks, to be
right.
fair. Yeah.
So those things, and I was actually glad that those things got incorporated because I feel like they're important to maintain a program, right? You can't just maintain a program without having the governance pieces in place, in my opinion. So so far though, I would say I'm actually looking at the planner here right now just to kind of see where things landed, but I think the ones that we haven't done yet, obviously, are the ones that are going to be the challenge, right? And for us, we have about 22 to 25 things when we ran through kind of the gap analysis that we weren't doing yet. Which we already knew, we just didn't know which ones they were as far as the trust mark goes. We were at about after our last SOC 2 audit, which concluded in March of this year, we felt that we had about 75% of CIS covered based on everything that we had already implemented over the
Sure.
last several years. So I think outside of the trust market itself, I would say like right now, one of the things, okay, here's a good one. Removable media encryption.
Yep, that's
I don't
hard.
know how I'm going to satisfy that one yet, right? I don't know how I'm going to do that other than the fact that right now we don't really use any removable media anymore internally other than to back things up on occasion or
Sure.
whatever. It's not something, I mean, we used to travel with external hard drives to be able to boot up
Well, who
machines,
doesn't? Yeah.
right? But now,
You have the cloud.
yeah, you just really don't need those types of things. I mean, we deal a lot in the Apple world, and in the Apple world, to reinstall an OS, if you've got an internet connection, you just
You just
boot
boom,
up,
done.
yeah, you just boot up with a key held down, and it does it, right?
So that raises a question. If you were to block the ability to connect removable media, you more or less solve this with a very like
Sure.
I'm not having to manage devices. I just so and obviously I recognize that that's not going to work for everybody, right? But I think if you start to your point, if this is the safeguard that you're stuck on, this is a great one to check out the cyber forums and post a question because I guarantee you, of the 60 plus MSPs in there, 65 plus MSPs, somebody has a policy for this.
Right.
And I've seen it. And obviously, you do a lot in the Mac space. There's a product out there. I probably shouldn't list it on this call because then people are like, I wonder how I can bypass that if it gets implemented on my machine. But there are products out there that do manage. One of the things you'll see is like, especially on the Windows side, GPOs in place that identify like it has to meet certain product ID in the way it's handled in device manager. And then it has to be a specific model within that. And then you can go in and say, and if the serial number doesn't match, those are, some ways that you could allow. But like to your point, if I look at I literally did not expect you to say the biggest challenge with the trust mark is the CIS safeguards, not governance and leadership, and not physical environmental. And when I think about it through the lens that you're describing, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, governance and leadership comes up all over the place. And quite honestly, it's very much open to interpretation because they can't define how leadership is supposed to look in every company. They can't define how you should operate your business, right? Like that's just not part of that doesn't work. It's largely subjective. Um, so wow. So to your point, with roughly 123 safeguards from CIS being in the trust mark, um, break it down for me a little bit further, because my guess is you weren't stumbling and tripping on all 100 plus CIS safeguards. Inventory, I think largely organizations in our world, in our industry, do a relatively, I'll be gentle with this, we do a relatively okay job managing our inventory, even if we don't do it out of intent. We do it as a byproduct of the tools that we use.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, inventory was one of those, I mean, it was challenging at first. Like when we really first started digging in to just knowing what we had, right? I mean, that was really the key, and identifying devices that maybe somebody had thrown on our network
Right.
or whatever. And it's like, oh, somebody's got, this IoT thing that they plugged in so that they could, use a voice command to turn the music on in the office, right? And so those types of things have been weeded out mostly by just disabling things that we were allowing in the past. And so, I mean, locking down the network and having a secure network configuration, though kind of a pain in the rear from time to time, ultimately has made me feel like I could put my head down at night and go to sleep without worrying that somebody was going to, get on our network. But man, it's been 5 years since we had any data housed on our physical network. So then it moved to, okay, now how are we going to ensure that the providers that we use to store data are also taking these steps? And then you get into the more vendor assessment side of things. And so it's just it's a long road, and each step leads to another area in which to work on and improve upon. And so, but the governance side, really, we did have a company that was walking us through that process and helping us develop the policies that were going to be needed once the audit was actually taking place. And so that part now is much easier. If I need a policy for something, it's way easier today to develop one. And as you and I have talked about with others, it's like, keep it simple. It doesn't have to describe every single thing under the sun, but just say, our organization, this is how we're going to address this. You don't have to get into specifics, because those specifics may change, and you don't want to have to continually go back and update these policies over and over again. You want to review them annually at least,
Right.
to make sure that they're still relevant or that something doesn't need to change. But all in all, they should be as simple as possible and direct the person who's reading the policy to the process or the procedures that are being done to satisfy the policy, or to enforce the policy, or to whatever.
Don't let the enemy of
You know
great
what
be
I'm
the
saying.
enemy of good. Don't let, we can quote Vince Lombardi and others on this. Actually, we should just quote you. 2 steps backwards is still progress, as long as you're making 1 step forward, right?
Right.
Do you think that the trust mark, and obviously this is a loaded question, is it achievable for anybody? I mean, in our space, like in this, I mean, obviously this is written for managed solutions, managed service providers.
I believe it. I believe that it is. I believe that if you want to achieve it, regardless of your size, regardless of the number of employees, revenue, whatever, it doesn't matter. If you want to do it, you can do it and make it happen, because there may be some things that you're coming across in that. And you and I have talked about
Sure.
this, for instance, having firewall on a server. Well, I don't have any servers, right? So
What?
does it not apply to me? Or and through our conversation, I realized, well, it could still apply in the future. And so I don't want to say not applicable. I wanted to say that at this time, Kinetic Technology Group doesn't have any servers in which
Right.
firewall can be enabled.
In the event a
However,
server shows up at Kinetic, it's you have something already in place to handle that situation. I think
exactly.
there's a flip side to this too, and I ran into this. You see this in other frameworks. Do you have a firewall? Awesome. I can answer that confidently. Yes, I do. Do I have it plugged in and turned on? That's not the question, and I'm not going to answer that. Right? Like that's one of the things that you're not going to see in CIS, right? Like it doesn't ask questions that are so full of assumptions, right? Because if we were to properly interpret, do you have a firewall? It's not asking, do you have the box? It's asking, do you have the firewall technology from a functionality and performance standpoint that's doing something that would positively reduce bad things from happening to your organization. Not, oh yeah, awesome, I'm so glad you still have it in the box. It's definitely not collecting dust because it's protected in plastic wrap.
Yeah, no doubt. But to kind of circle back to the conversation about whether I believe that anybody can do this as a technology provider, a cybersecurity provider, an MSP, whatever you want to call us these days. I do believe, and I think the biggest challenge that most people are going to come across is the time, right? And depending on the size of I mean, we're a small company. I believe, we have 13 employees, 13 full-time employees.
You're not a
And
big company.
no, not a big company. But I think that the leadership has to take the wheel of this, have buy-in within the leadership, if that's one person or two people or three people or whatever. The person steering the ship has to be bought in, and then he has to get the rest of his leadership or her leadership bought in.
Yeah,
And
you basically have to get everybody on the ship bought in.
you do. Yeah, inevitably you do. But that takes some time. And, early on, you're force feeding people and you're going to tick people off because you're going to do things and you're going to take away things that they've been able to do for however many years they've worked for you. And you have to explain to them why you're doing it. And then you're going to do it with your clients down the road. So,
I'll give you a caveat to that. I think that you're spot on with one caveat, and that is creating a policy does not require any buy-in. Creating it. Getting people to do what the policy scope says needs to be done requires buy-in. But I think too often we get so focused on creating policy A and forcing or attempting to get buy-in to adopting that policy that we're stuck and we don't move on to getting the policies written that we know we need to have. Because if we're going to get buy-in and we can paint a picture that's complete with all the policies, then having the conversation's a little bit different. Because when you get to like vulnerability management or you get to least privileged access in some of those, you're not seeing just the one policy in standalone picture, like almost a spot in time. You're seeing the strategy around where we're going and where we're going to get to someday doing a pen test.
Sure.
Didn't just start with, guys, this is going to suck. We're going to do a pen test. We're going to do it tomorrow. Right?
No.
Like you might get some heart palpitations from a few people in the company because they know what kind of things might be stood up in the environment. Like, we're ripping Spotify to a server and maybe we shouldn't be doing that because we didn't put a proper firewall in, because that's the only reason that you would be in trouble for ripping from Spotify. Okay, so I think we've covered this pretty well. Like it's achievable, it's reasonable, and surprisingly, the challenges aren't actually in the governance and leadership if we take only Jim's word for it. I find myself, as I think about it, agreeing with you because I actually hadn't thought about it through that perspective. And quite honestly, it's also the least number of safeguards to answer, right? So get those out of the way. They're the easy ones. Any parting thoughts on this? I mean, this has been super helpful. It's funny, I talk to people about the Trustmark and CIS and frameworks all the time, and that is the first time I've had someone say it's more difficult to follow prescriptive technical safeguards than it is to follow vague and subjective governance and leadership safeguards.
Well, like I think the amount of experience that we've now had doing it is what made it easier for us once we jumped into the Trustmark. I will
Fair.
say, I will say that starting off, those probably will be some of the biggest challenges that somebody that, I mean, look, I
If
was
you don't
part
have an employee handbook, good luck.
no, I was just going there. I was like, I was in business for 10 years before I even had an employee handbook.
Sure.
You know, I mean, and then all of a sudden I've got, you know, 9 employees and people posting on Facebook about their bad experience with a client or a vendor or whatever. And I'm like, what am I going to do about that?
Yeah,
You know,
I gotcha.
well, I got to have some kind of policy in place, and you know, then it's like, okay, it's the same thing.
Fair point. This is why early on, when you cut your own checks to pay staff versus now you outsource it to a third party. Yeah, well
Right.
said. Any parting thoughts before I let you go? Any like helpful books? I had one I thought of, if you're going through the trust market, made me think of the Cyber Defense Matrix as a good, useful resource that's outside of like just using what's on CIS security or the resources coming from CompTIA.
Well, I was just gonna say that I think that if you're doing this, CompTIA has a vast amount of resources to help you do this, just through the community, you know, through the ability, the forums, just the membership. If
Right,
you're not,
cyber forums you're talking about. There's a Q&A
cyber
in
forums,
there.
yeah.
Get yourself in there.
And
We
if you're
have
not,
weekly.
yeah, and if you're not participating in some type of peer group with uh, other companies like you, I would encourage you to do that, because you're gonna then you broaden that community even more. And I believe that the days of us being so self-contained in our own little bubbles and worried about, you know, losing business to this guy up the road or that guy up,
Agreed.
you know, it's like it's a big blue ocean, right? And there's lots of enough business for everybody out there. And you know, don't be worried about those types of things. Get involved in community in some capacity, because there's lots of resources out there. And I mean, like you, Chris, I mean, you are probably the most available person that I know to people when they have
I wonder
questions.
what else I do.
And it's like, I think, you know, the fact that you do that, and I admire that about you, and just and your willingness to help people that are struggling with things when they're trying to accomplish this stuff. So I appreciate it. I commend you in that. And just use the resources that are available, because they are vast. And you know, that's it.
Well,
My
there you
name's
have it.
Harryman, and I'll take a phone call if I have to.
There
So
you
I'm
go. So
like,
I want to add to what you just said. I appreciate all the smoke blowing. I want to say this: the challenges around demographic diversity of like not being too close to another solution provider. If you get hit with an incident, your closest ally is likely going to be your biggest competitor. If they are doing due diligence when it comes to cybersecurity, you will need them as an asset when something bad happens, and something bad is bound to happen. Whether or not you've made lots of friends with your competition is going to be largely tied to how quick and how resilient you are in that recovery. So with that, those of you listening, thanks. Have a great week.